Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We spend a lot of time on our show, of course, talking about wheat, but today we want to spend a few minutes talking about Oklahoma's cotton crop, which in 2018 was one of the largest on record. Here's our extension cotton specialist, Seth Byrd.
Yes, we had a lot of new growers and a lot of folks that got really excited about cotton coming out of the 2017 season. We discussed it quite a few times about our hot, dry start, a lot of rough decisions early on to replant or keep stands, but overall I think most of our cotton got through that early part okay, and we caught rains in the middle of the year, caught probably more rain than we needed near the end of the year, and so, you know, specifically for harvest, we had some tough times getting really good leaf drop, really good activity from our defoliants, and then we had, you know, some really intermittent harvest conditions where you could maybe get in the field for a few hours a day, but we didn't really see those big, you know, sort of green light periods where you could just harvest for a long period of time. So we produced, you know, probably less cotton on more acres than we did in 2017, but it took a lot longer to get out of the field because of those conditions. So now we've got a lot of the crop has gone, you know, through the gin, and we're getting a lot of those classing reports back. And so from a quality standpoint, we're seeing fairly good cotton. It's not, you know, the premiums for every category like we'd love to see, but we don't see anything that really is a big red flag or a black mark on our quality, which I think is a good sign considering we did have some pretty rough conditions getting harvest through, and we had a lot of potential weathering that happened. So overall, maybe not the, you know, the 2017 bell ringer year, but we had a pretty good year overall. And
we'll take it, of course. I know the numbers are still kind of getting finalized, but any kind of perspective on the number of bales produced?
So, you know, the USDA projected, I believe back in September, if I'm remembering all the numbers right, I think we were around 950. I haven't seen a real good update yet. We've got a lot of cotton that gets obviously ginned in Kansas, and a lot of the Kansas gins are a little behind right now. They had to do a lot of upgrading there. I think we'll probably be pretty close to those projections. They kind of did bump up our projected pounds per acre number, which that kind of gives us a pretty good key into how many bales we're going to produce, ballpark if we know how many acres we're going to harvest. So a lot of estimated numbers, a lot of big numbers to try to figure out, but I think we'll be close to projections.
Okay, well, keep us posted on how all of those kind of finalize. Oklahoma, of course, is a unique growing state, cotton included. What kind of questions are you getting this time of year from producers?
So producers and the industry folks overall love to know where we're going to be in 2019. You know, we saw a big jump from 16 to 17. We saw another really big jump from 17 to 18 in terms of acres planted. And so we kind of want to know where are we going from here. And so that's been the big question, is what's the Oklahoma cotton landscape going to look like in 2019? And I think all signs and all projections from folks that we talk to that are you know, connected with the industry say that we're going to go up again in acres. So we could see an increase. I don't know how much of an increase. I tend to be a little conservative on my acres guesses. So I think we'll hit around that 800,000 mark, and we were at 760 this year. So that's a 40,000 acre increase, which isn't huge, but it's still an increase. And then new variety availability. And so there's a lot of new traits that are coming on the market. We've now got 3-gene bulgur or BT traits, which are insect resistant traits. We've got multiple 3-gene packages of herbicide traits, and availability of these varieties, they're in very high demand. And so what we have heard so far is that our availability for those should be good, and we have a lot of different growing regions in the state, and so each of those varieties and trait packages may fit a different region better than others. And so we hope that we can address grower needs with varieties available across our you know, multiple growing environments in Oklahoma.
And of course, that's one of the challenges and opportunities of extension, and you and the team are adapting to that as you present information to growers around the state. Talk about the upcoming event, how it's structured, and what the opportunity is for folks to learn more.
Yeah, so January 16th, we're having our first attempt at a Oklahoma cotton update. And so it's going to be both an in-person meeting in Altus at our Research and Extension Center there, just south of town. I think everybody in that area knows where the farm is down there. But we're also going to broadcast it online as a webinar. So sort of similar to the wheatonars that have been very successful for that crop. We're going to try to maybe ride the coattails of their idea. And really the whole goal is to get information out to a statewide audience. We've got, like I mentioned a minute ago, we've got a lot of different little growing regions in Oklahoma. So just to kind of bring everybody into the same room, whether they actually be there in Altus in person, or they can join us online. And so it's an informal meeting. We don't have any strict agenda, but we just want to hopefully provide folks a a place to network and share ideas and ask questions where, maybe in the typical extension meeting, you're more of a local meeting. This is going to be hopefully a more statewide audience, so a little less formal, a little more broad spectrum of topics we can cover.
So in terms of questions, folks can send those in advance?
Yes, they can email. If they follow us on Twitter, they can obviously message us on Twitter as a direct message. They can, a lot of our older producers probably get the newsletter from our IPM specialist in Altus, Jerry Goodson, so they have contact with Jerry. Any way they want to get us to us, or the day of. We'd love to have a discussion and not really a meeting. And so day of, if they're in the room, ask in person. If they're online, type it into the little question box there, and anything we can do to hopefully spur conversation and answer questions that a lot of folks probably have is kind of our goal.
Right, some of that shared dialogue, of
right.
course. Okay, well, keep us posted on that, and we'll be sure to follow along too.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Seth. And for more information on the meeting, the Oklahoma Cotton Update, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
We're just a few weeks away from the start of the spring calving season for those of us here in the southwest part of the United States. I think it's a good time to refresh our memories about what really happens in a normal parturition or a normal calving. We know that the process of calving is basically divided up into three different parts or three different stages. Stage one is occurring before we see really anything going on with that cow or heifer, because stage one, the biggest event that's happening is the dilation or the relaxation of the cervix. Now, scientists think that stage one may last as short a time as 4 hours, may last as long as about 24 hours. So there's tremendous variation in how long stage one actually occurs. What we will generally see during stage one is perhaps some behavioral changes in the cow or heifer that's in stage one of calving, where she perhaps will begin to walk the fence, isolate herself. Perhaps a heifer will kick at her belly as the uterine contractions are beginning. But again, we may not see much going on during stage one, but it's important that the cervix is dilating in that particular period of time, and I would suggest that you learn to determine whether the cervix is completely dilated before you ever try to pull or extract a calf that needs some assistance. That's stage one. Stage two is where all the action seems to take place. Stage two of calving we generally define as beginning when we first have the appearance of the water bag, those fluids that have been around that fetus during the previous 9 months. That water bag appears, and stage two ends when the calf is completely delivered on the ground. Now, the length of stage two is important that we understand. Research done at Montana, at the USDA station up there, and here at Oklahoma State University several years ago has determined that stage two will last, if everything goes well, about 1 hour in the case of first calf heifers, those that have never calved before, and about half that long, or about 30 minutes, in the case of an adult cow, a cow that has delivered calves successfully before. If that stage two goes longer than that particular period of time, then chances are there's something wrong and she needs our assistance. Let's move on to stage three then. Stage three is the cleaning or the release of the placenta, the afterbirth. That usually should take place within 8 to 12 hours after the calf has been delivered. If those placenta or those membranes have not been released after 12 hours, that's what we call a retained placenta. And in that situation, you probably want to watch that cow very, very carefully for the next few days. If you see any signs of droopy ears, being lethargic, chances are there's some kind of infection setting up. You need to get veterinary help. Call your local veterinarian for the kinds of treatment that they will need for that situation. So those are the three stages of calving that I think we need to understand. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3. If you'll understand the normals, then you'll be able to recognize when those cows or heifers need our assistance. I would also suggest that you take time to go to the SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu. We'll have a show link there where you can download the publication, Calving Time Management for Beef Cows and Heifers. It's E-1006. Excellent publication that'll help you a lot through this calving season. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
We're out here at the Range Cow Research Center with Dave Lalman. And Dave, you have a field day going on, so tell us a little bit about what you have going.
We're just getting ready to get started. We think we're going to have around 135 to 150 people today. The primary objective is to talk about ways to minimize hay feeding waste. So just from a general principle standpoint, we recognize that for a forage-based operation, minimizing hay feeding period is probably more profitable for more operations. However, with the cost of land these days, it seems like we have more producers that are feeding hay, and Dr. Peel's data shows very clearly that, with the invention of the round baler, hay feeding has increased over time. But another way to look at that is that it actually may be a reflection of the high cost of land, and so you can just go buy hay and increase your stocking or your cattle in price. So Curtis, the primary thing we're doing here today is try to help people think about alternative ways to feed hay and stop wasting as much of it.
So one of those ways that you're attempting to reduce the waste is showing producers the difference in types of hay feeders and the amount of waste one can cause and the amount of waste that doesn't cause.
That's one. We're going to talk about several techniques, and there are ways that we think you can probably reduce the amount of hay required by close to 30% in a winter compared to just putting all the hay out cows can eat 24/7. Okay, so yeah, the study we talked about a few weeks ago on SUNUP, this is an example of it right here. This is what we call, I call it an ag shop feeder because I built several of these when I was in high school. But it has no solid bottom ring. It's economical. There are some advantages. It's inexpensive. It's light. It's easy to move. But these feeders fairly consistently waste about 21% of the original bale weight. So you can see all the way. So once those cows stand on that hay and defecate on it, urinate on it, they're not going to eat it. So it's a tremendous waste.
And for this field day, you did a 24-hour demonstration on the amount of waste each one, can occur.
Yeah, we did. So we sort of replicated our research study we did several years ago, and it was Sunday afternoon. We put out these, we cleaned off these concrete pads. We put a fresh bale in these feeders, and then 24 hours later, we came and scraped up or raked up all the hay around these feeders and weighed it on an electronic scale. This feeder had 100 pounds of hay waste. The yellow feeder with a solid ring around the bottom had 50 pounds of hay waste around the outside. And the basket feeder, so that feeder incorporates two things. One is a kind of a modified basket on top and then a solid ring around the bottom. The waste around it was 6 pounds. So dramatic difference, just like the research showed several years ago.
All right, thanks, Dave. And now we're going to hear from our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist, Paul Beck, on the benefits of rolling out hay.
So all of us have our favorite hay feeding areas where it's the most convenient to get to, or we can access it in wetter periods. But if we continue to feed hay in the same place time after time, year after year, we can concentrate a lot of nutrients from the hay and from cattle's manure and urine into that very small area. And we've done some soil testing, and we can have 10 to 20 times more phosphorus and potassium and organic matter in those hay feeding sites than the surrounding field. There's a considerable amount of nutrients in hay, and it takes a lot of nutrients from a hay meadow when we bale that hay. The average Bermuda grass bale is about 8% crude protein. That's 1.3% nitrogen, and it's 1.3% potassium, and about 0.2% phosphorus. And that's the equivalent of about 100 pounds of 717 fertilizer per round bale. And that's about $30 worth of fertilizer if we're trying to replace that. So if we can spread that across a field, we'd be having a lot of advantages to our production, and can harvest a lot of nutrients that way. And that's why we, a lot of times we'll recommend moving our hay feeding site or unrolling hay across a field throughout the winter. When we have concentrated hay feeding sites, and especially during calving, it's not as good a hygiene in those areas, and we can have considerable problems with scours and navel ill on those calves that are born in those areas, because cows like to calve and then bring those calves up to that hay feeding site. So that's when we start getting more problems with scours and navel ill during calving. If we can spread our hay feeding site, we're spreading out the manure, and we have less problems. If we roll out hay every day at the amount the cows will eat, we can decrease our hay waste from about 50%, as Dr. Lalman was talking about earlier, down to about 25%. If we can do something a little bit extra as we move those bales, having a temporary electric fence wire to keep the cattle off from that hay, we can decrease that even further down to about 15%. There's as many different ways to unroll hay as your imagination. You can put it on a steep hill and roll it down. You can push it. I've seen people push it with four-wheelers. Then we have this new equipment that's coming into the state. As you can see here, we're going to demonstrate today where it's unrolled using a tractor, and it does more mixing of the hay as you're unrolling it.
Wes Lee here with the first Mesonet weather report for 2019. One of the biggest complaints of agriculture producers recently has been how difficult it is to feed cattle and perform field operations with the muddy field conditions. The 2018 total rainfall map shows the normal expected decline in rainfall from the east to the west. Broken Bow had the most with 73 inches and Kenton the least with just over 15 inches. With the exception of the southeastern quadrant, the rest of the state was mostly within 5 inches of normal for the year. There is a true weather saying in agriculture that it is not how much rain you get, but when you get it that really counts. If we look at the 2018 statewide rainfall, shown here represented with the red line, and compare it to the long-term average shown by the blue fill area, we see that the second half of the year was definitely much wetter than the first half. Looking at our current shallow soil moisture readings for percent plant available water, we see that the entire state is shown in green. A vast majority of the sites are indicating at or near 100% storage capacity. Deeper soil moisture sensors show a very similar trend. I don't see anything in the forecast that indicates these wet conditions will get any better anytime soon. A high probability of rainfall is forecasted before the end of this week, and next week the precipitation probability of higher than normal is predicted. Next up is Gary with more recent rainfall information and a great drought situation.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, I have great news to start out the new year here on SUNUP on the Mesonet Weather Report. Oftentimes, we're in short supply of that when dealing with weather in Oklahoma, so let's get straight to the new Drought Monitor report and let's celebrate. As you can see on the Drought Monitor, we have no yellow or any other color on the state map, so for the first time since June 14th of 2016, we are completely devoid of either abnormally dry conditions or drought conditions, and that is indeed something to celebrate. So what led to our good-looking drought map? Well, it's been those wonderful storm systems we had during December. If we look at the Oklahoma Mesonet rainfall totals, This is from December 1st, the official beginning of climatological or meteorological winter. We do see down in the southeastern parts of the state more than 10 inches of rain, and that decreases as we go to the northwest to less than an inch in parts of the northwest. But if we look at that from the departure from normal rainfall map since December 1st, we see most of the state once again with the surplus of at least an inch or two, some areas more, some areas a little less. The only deficits we see are up in far northwestern Oklahoma, Harper, Ellis, Beaver County, that area, and also the western Oklahoma Panhandle. Now, luckily, those areas of the state have seen rainfall prior to that December 1st period that helped them out. So everybody has gotten a good dose of moisture. Hopefully, it'll stick around a while. Well, the good news is we are in the depths of winter, so we don't see the moisture demands that we will in a couple of months as we start to warm up. So hopefully we can keep drought at bay and maybe get a little bit more moisture and look good for spring. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
The holidays are behind us. Some USDA offices have been closed. We're looking forward to the 2019 wheat crop, and prices haven't really changed. Kim, a lot to talk about this week. Let's talk first about the status of some offices being closed and kind of what that means for the markets.
Well, the market runs on information, and the buyers and the sellers, the players in the market, they use that information to determine if they're going to buy or sell, and that drives prices. The USDA has the best information available to the market. Now, of course, there's pre-release estimates in the market, different analysts guess what they will be, but they guess what USDA's numbers going to be. And without those numbers, the market's not as efficient as it would be if those offices were open and the USDA was releasing the numbers.
When we talk about kind of current crops, what's the latest that you're hearing on planted acres?
Well, one of the reports that were to be released this week was the seeded acres, winter wheat seeded acres reports. The pre-release estimates came out, like Reuters does a survey of market analysts. They came out with an estimate for all winter wheat of 32.2 million acres compared to 32.5 last year. That's down just 300 million acres or so. Hard red winter wheat acres they estimated at 22.7 million. That's down from 23.2 last year. And soft red winter wheat acres were projected to be about 100,000 acres higher at 6 million compared to 5.9 last year. So I think overall what we see with hard red winter wheat, and that's what's important to us, is we've got less acres than we had last year. And a lot of those acres are in Kansas, and they've got higher yields in Oklahoma, and I think that's good or positive news for our wheat prices.
In terms of market news and chatter that we've heard recently, what do you think will have the most impact on the markets?
Well, if I'm looking at what's I've heard over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think Russia's always in the news. They increased their beginning stocks, so that's more wheat they had to export than we anticipated. They increased their production for last year. That increased their wheat available for exports, and that had a negative impact on our price. And then another big thing is India is looking at harvesting a near record or record crop. India's harvest will start in March. India normally doesn't export wheat, but it looks like they may have wheat they can export during that April-May time period, and that'll get into our market.
Now, before the holidays, you were somewhat optimistic about the 2019 prices. Has that changed? What's the update?
Well, I'm not as optimistic. I was saying you give me a 60-pound test weight, 12.5% protein, I'm going to give you 575. With what's going on in Russia, Ukraine acres planted acres are supposed to be slightly higher. Russia's crops in very good condition. India's crops coming on, and so I just can't be as optimistic as I was on that $5.75. I'm still semi-optimistic. Our current price is around $4.90. This time last year, it was closer to $4, so we're starting at a higher point. So you got to be a little happier about prices, but not as happy as I was 3 weeks ago.
Okay, Kim. Well, thanks a lot for all the information. We'll see you next week.
Both dietary supplements and drugs can be beneficial to our health. However, they're not the same. Here are some key ways in which they're different. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, along with FDA regulations, define drugs in part by their intended use as articles that diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent disease, and as articles other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of a human or even an animal. So when we talk about intended use, well, what does the FDA mean? When the FDA says intended use, they mean any claim about treating or preventing disease that's stated on the product label, or even in any advertising or on the internet or any other promotional material. Dietary supplements include things such as vitamins, minerals, herbs, amino acids, and enzymes. These articles function in either of two ways. They can either ensure that our bodies get enough of vital substances to function properly, or they can help reduce the risk of disease. Supplements can be found in forms that are similar to drugs, for example, tablets, capsules, soft gels, gel caps, powders, or liquids. However, it's important to remember that dietary supplements are not meant to treat disease, nor are they permitted to be marketed for those purposes. It's also important to remember that the FDA is not authorized to review dietary supplements for safety or effectiveness before they're marketed. So drugs and dietary supplements can contribute to our health. However, they're not identical, nor should they be used in the same way. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or fapc.biz or download the FAPC app.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.